Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the complex ideas and crucial source material shaping our world, making sure you know what really matters. Today we're getting into something pretty significant, maybe even a bit controversial. It's about America's tech elite, Silicon Valley mostly.
Yeah.
Where's all that brain power going?
Exactly. And is it going in the right direction? That's the core question.
Yeah, because the source material we're diving into today suggests it might be steering us towards some serious national risk.
It really does. We're dissecting this idea of the technological republic, which honestly sounds a bit grand, but it's really a call to action. It's framed as a pretty sweeping indictment of Silicon Valley's current culture.
An indictment. Strong word.
It is. The main argument is that this incredible concentration of talent, resources, all that engineering genius, well, it's been critically misdirected. The source wants to basically shake the tech elite out of what it calls a culture of complacency.
Complacency. Okay. And redirect them towards what?
Towards national purpose, towards defense. Especially now, with AI changing everything so rapidly, it's about aligning tech with the needs of the republic.
It sounds almost like a throwback, doesn't it? Asking private companies to think about the public good, not just the next big consumer app or quarterly profits.
It does feel a bit mid-century, like something from the post-war era, but the source argues the stakes are just incredibly high right now. It suggests that the future really hinges on this. Hard power, our global influence, even our shared beliefs. It all depends on whether Silicon Valley can shift its focus.
Shift from optimizing ad clicks to, building things that actually protect the nation.
That's the gist of it. And the source is pretty blunt about why this misdirection occurred. It points fingers squarely at the prevailing mindset within big tech.
Okay, so what's the core problem identified?
The source claims these companies started seeing themselves as existing essentially outside the country, like they're global entities, detached from any specific national project. Rootless, almost.
And that detachment leads to a particular kind of ethical thinking. You mentioned a thin utilitarian approach.
Right.
What does that look like in practice?
It means the focus narrows right down. It becomes about managing individuals, optimizing systems for efficiency. People become mere atoms in a system to be managed and contained.
Like cogs in a machine, but a digital one.
Pretty much. The big, messy questions get sidelined. Questions about who we are as a nation, what we owe each other, what kind of future we want to build together, those are set aside.
In favor of what? Frictionless shopping, better algorithms.
Exactly. Maximum individual utility, optimized experiences, but not collective security, not shared purpose.
Right.
We've traded the hard questions for convenient answers.
So the big existential stuff gets swapped for small, easy stuff.
That's the core indictment. The source sees these vital questions of purpose and national commitment as being treated like anachronisms of another age. And this retreat, this hollowing out, is happening just as AI is poised to completely shake up the global order. It demands exactly the kind of collective, purpose-driven action we seem to have forgotten how to do.
It's a crossroads moment. We need engineers thinking about the why, not just the how.
We need them to help define who we are, not just build faster gadgets.
Okay, let's rewind a bit. Because this idea of tech serving the state, it feels very current, very urgent, but the source argues this isn't new at all. It's actually deeply American.
It absolutely is. This concept, the first technological republic, argues that the union of science, engineering, and statecraft is baked into America's DNA. We tend to forget, but many of the founders were engineers, inventors, polymaths. They approached problems analytically.
Can you give us some examples? Who are we talking about?
Well, Jefferson, for instance. We think of him as a statesman, a writer. But he was obsessed with technical improvement. Sundials, better plows, writing machines.
Right. And Benjamin Franklin, obviously.
Franklin's a giant here. His work on electricity, lightning rods, bifocals, it was groundbreaking. One Harvard chemist even compared his impact to Newton or Watson and Crick. He literally ushered in a scientific revolution.
Wow. So it wasn't just a hobby for them. It was fundamental to how they thought.
Exactly. They brought an engineer's mindset to politics, a focus on practical problems, empirical observation, finding solutions. Jefferson even said science was his passion, while politics was his duty.
That ordering is interesting. Passion first, duty second.
It suggests that scientific curiosity was the natural state, and political service was the necessary work to protect the space for that curiosity to flourish.
Which is, a world away from today's political scene, right?
Yeah.
The source points out it's dominated by lawyers now.
It's a huge shift from a technical problem-solving mindset to a more rhetorical, adversarial one. Lawyers are crucial, of course, but their skills are different. And the numbers bear it out. A 2023 survey found only, 1.3% of state legislators were scientists or engineers?
Just 1.3%. That's tiny.
It really is. We've sort of pushed the technical minds out of the political arena. We value legal argument over perhaps an understanding of empirical reality.
And given that history, the collaboration during World War II seems even more significant. That was when science and the state became completely intertwined.
Absolutely. Driven by sheer necessity. Vannevar Bush is the key figure here.
Head of the Office of Scientific Research and Development.
Right. He basically marshaled the entire scientific capacity of the country for the war effort. It was incredibly effective. So effective that President Roosevelt wrote him this really important letter in late 1944.
What was FDR thinking about in that letter?
He was looking ahead. He saw this unique experiment, this wartime mobilization of science, and wondered how it could be used, profitably employed in times of peace.
It's not just for defense.
No, much broader. He envisioned using the government's resources and organization to drive science forward for public health, education, general national welfare, a national engine for progress, basically.
And this wasn't just happening in labs. Culturally, scientists became, well, almost celebrities, didn't they?
They absolutely did. Think about J. Robert Oppenheimer leading the Manhattan Project. He wasn't just some obscure physicist. He was a national figure symbolizing this fusion of genius and purpose.
Like Marie Curie before him.
Right. These technical minds were central to the whole American century narrative. They were heroes.
So the source says by the end of WWII, this mix of science, engineering, and public life was complete and unremarkable. Just the way things were.
Yeah, it was normalized. And this technical superiority wasn't just about winning wars. It was crucial for something else, too.
Which was?
Political legitimacy. The source brings in the philosopher Jürgen Habermas here.
Habermas argued that leaders need to deliver, right? Economic growth, security, tangible results.
Exactly. If they fail to deliver on those things, if the nation visibly falls behind, technically think a crumbling infrastructure, stagnant economy, losing a military edge, then people lose faith.
Not just in the politicians, but in the whole system.
Precisely. Democracy makes promises. A better life, safety. If it doesn't deliver the goods, if it can't harness technology for the public good, its legitimacy starts to erode. That successful science-state partnership was vital for democracy's credibility.
Okay, that really sets the stage. Because the decline we're about to talk about isn't just a shift in focus for Silicon Valley. It potentially undermines the whole foundation of trust in our institutions.
And that historical foundation technical skill married to national duty is exactly what the source claims got eroded, particularly after the Cold War ended.
Right, the sense of, we won, history's over.
Yeah, the winner's fallacy.
Yeah.
The fall of the Soviet Union led to this period of, frankly, dangerous overconfidence. Francis Fukuyama's The End of History really captured that mood in '89. The idea that Western liberal democracy wasn't just one option, it was the final option, the end point.
And if you think you've already won permanently, you stop worrying about how you won in the first place.
You forget that maintaining freedom requires strength. It requires hard power. And today, increasingly, that hard power comes from software.
The ability to project power, even if it's just the threat of power.
Right. The source brings up Thomas Schelling, the economist who studied conflict.
His famous line.
The power to hurt is bargaining power. To exploit it is diplomacy, vicious diplomacy, but diplomacy. It's a stark reminder that ideals need leverage. If you give up the ability to build that leverage, you're essentially giving up on effective diplomacy in a dangerous world.
But Silicon Valley really came of age in this post-history haze. They became, as the source puts it, technological agnostics.
Yeah, they started seeing the government not as a partner, like in the Vannevar Bush days, but as an obstacle, an impediment to moving fast and breaking things.
And their focus shifted entirely.
To the consumer. That's where the money was, sustenance. So the best minds weren't focused on, say, fundamental physics or national defense challenges. They were optimizing ad algorithms, making online shopping smoother, building the next viral video app.
They stopped asking the big questions, like, what should we be building? For what purpose?
Exactly. And that misallocation of talent and capital really exploded during the dot-com bubble. The source uses the phrase, lost in toyland.
Ah, yes, e-toys.
A perfect example. Here's a company selling toys online, and it hits a $10 billion market cap in 1999. Just staggering.
And Pets.com, Cosmo,
Huh.
all these companies solving, quote, Inconveniences and indeed indignities of daily life.
Like getting better practice greens for golf, as the source rightly notes. It wasn't exactly nation-building ambition, it was shallow.
And when that bubble burst, the lack of real substance was laid bare. This cultural shift also created a weird situation, didn't it? Where the very generation most capable of building advanced defense tech is the most reluctant to do it.
That's perfectly captured by the Project Maven controversy at Google back in 2018.
Right, the Defense Department contract for AI analysis of drone footage.
Yeah, for special forces.
Yeah.
And the employee reaction was intense.
They wrote that open letter.
Thousands signed it, arguing that building tech for potentially lethal outcomes was not acceptable. And crucially, Google backed down. They paused the work because of the terrible backlash.
So it wasn't a technical problem? They could do it, they just wouldn't.
It highlights this deep disconnect. Engineers are fine building incredibly sophisticated systems to track our every click for advertisers.
Basically building a private surveillance state.
Right. But building better software for the military, software that could potentially save soldiers' lives using that same analytical power. That crossed a line for many of them.
They benefit from the security provided by the military, but resist contributing to its effectiveness.
It's a profound contradiction. And this technological agnosticism, the source argues, is rooted in a broader cultural shift, the abandonment of belief in the public square.
Meaning, we lost the stomach for standing up for difficult principles. The source contrasts this with some powerful historical examples.
Yeah, examples of what it calls hard belief, like Arya Nair at the ACLU.
Defending the Nazis' right to march in Skokie in the 70s, despite his own family history.
Exactly. He stood on the First Amendment principle knowing it would be incredibly unpopular and painful.
And it cost the ACLU, what, 30,000 members?
A huge cost. But he didn't waver. Or Pauli Murray, the civil rights pioneer, arguing that even someone like George Wallace had the right to speak at Yale.
Even though she profoundly disagreed with him and had fought against everything he stood for. She said the possibility of violence wasn't enough to deny his rights.
The common thread is courage. Standing for a principle even when it's hard, even when it goes against your personal feelings or popular opinion.
Now contrast that with, well, recent events, like the university presidents testifying before Congress in 2023.
That was illuminating, wasn't it? Their answers about handling calls for genocide on campus were so cautious, clinical, hedged, full of it depends on the context.
They felt like they were terrified of saying the wrong thing, of creating a soundbite that would end their careers.
And they got hammered for it anyway. The source says they were punished mercilessly for publicly mustering anything approaching an authentic belief. It shows the intense pressure cooker leaders operate in now.
This constant scrutiny, the proliferation of frenzies, the ruthless exposure.
It drastically raises the perceived cost of taking any kind of risk, of holding any strong conviction publicly.
Which leads to, well, bland leadership.
Or worse, ineffectual leaders. If you know that one misstep, one unpopular but principled stand could lead to total career destruction via online mob who's going to stick their neck out. Only the extremely cautious. Likability is a jail, as the source quotes.
It traps you, prevents real action. It reminds me of that Goethe quote the source uses.
You will never touch the hearts of others if it does not emerge from your own. If leaders are constantly self-censoring, constantly managing their image, people sense the hollowness. There's no real connection.
So we end up with a managerial class focused on avoiding blame, not on achieving goals.
Yeah.
And this ties into the academic world too, right? The academic retreat from collective identity.
Absolutely. This cultural shift has deep roots in academia, particularly with the canon wars.
Starting back in the 60s and 70s.
Right. When universities like Stanford, Amherst started ditching required courses on Western civilization.
The argument being that the traditional curriculum was exclusionary Eurocentric.
And there was truth to that critique, certainly, but the way it unfolded often led to dismissing the entire narrative. Athens, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, as just an essentially fictitious grand narrative, an imposed story, not a shared heritage.
And post-colonial theory added fuel to that fire.
Definitely. Edward Said's Orientalism in 1978 was hugely influential. It provided a powerful framework for viewing the West critically, sometimes as primarily an object of moral scorn for its history of exploitation.
Which reshaped entire fields in academia.
And eventually filtered down into corporate HR, diversity training, ethical guidelines in places like Silicon Valley. A vocabulary of critique became dominant.
So the intention might have been noble to create a more inclusive narrative, but the result was, what? The source says the balloon was cut loose.
Meaning, we dismantled the old shared story, the common cultural foundation, but didn't really build anything coherent in its place. A vacuum was created.
And nature abhors a vacuum. What filled it?
The market. Consumerism. Neoliberalism.
That's the great irony, isn't it? The critique aimed at curbing corporate power inadvertently cleared the way for it by undermining other sources of meaning and identity.
Precisely. If your identity isn't rooted in shared history, civic duty, or cultural values, what's left? It becomes defined by what you buy, what brands you associate with, what online tribes you belong to.
A consumer identity.
Yeah.
Fleeting, individualistic.
Exactly the opposite of the kind of shared purpose and collective will needed to face major national challenges, like, say, the rise of AI.
Which makes this next part, the AI crossroads, feel incredibly urgent. If we've lost our shared story, how on earth do we muster the collective effort for something like a new Manhattan Project?
And that cultural void slams right into the reality of AI. The source argues pretty forcefully that the 21st century is the software century, and it's fundamentally ending the old era of deterrence.
The atomic age is over.
In terms of strategic dominance, yes. Nuclear weapons still matter, obviously, but the decisive edge, the future of power, lies in AI. Our ability to design, build, and deploy AI weaponry faster and smarter than anyone else.
We're in a new arms race, whether we like it or not.
An arms race defined by these incredibly powerful and frankly somewhat mysterious systems, like large language models, LLMs.
Trillions of parameters. Can you break that down? What does that actually mean?
Think of a parameter like a knob or a connection point in a vast network, kind of like synapses in the brain. When you have trillions of them and you feed the system enormous amounts of data, it starts to find patterns and capabilities that nobody explicitly programmed into it.
It's not just following instructions, it's learning.
Yeah.
Developing emergent abilities.
Exactly. Things like complex reasoning, writing code, even showing what some researchers call sparks of artificial general intelligence. These systems are becoming powerful black boxes.
We build them, but we don't fully understand how they do what they do.
That's largely true, especially at the cutting edge. And that lack of perfect understanding, combined with the sheer power, creates a huge ethical dilemma.
The comparison to the atomic bomb feels apt. Oppenheimer's known sin.
Right. That sense of moral weight of unleashing something world-changing and potentially catastrophic. But the source points out that the prevailing attitude in tech today is often quite different.
More like that physicist, Percy Bridgman.
Yeah, Bridgman's view is basically, scientists just discover facts. Morality isn't part of the job description. There's no sin connected with it. And you see echoes of that today. Engineers focused on the technical challenge, optimizing the system, often deliberately avoiding the larger moral or societal questions.
It explains the anxiety, right, that calls for a pause.
Absolutely. That open letter calling for a 6-month pause got over 30,000 signatures. You have high-level people like Lina Khan at the FTC talking about non-trivial risks of civilizational collapse from AI. The worry is real.
But the source argues pausing is strategically dangerous. Why?
Because our adversaries won't pause. It's pragmatic, almost brutally so. The argument is that history shows deterrence works. Sometimes building the sharp tools is necessary precisely to prevent their use.
Back to Nobel and his dynamite.
Right. Nobel hoped dynamite's sheer destructive power would make war unthinkable. The only thing that will ever prevent nations from beginning war is terror, he said.
And the nuclear age, despite its terror, did usher in a period without great power war. The long peace.
Exactly. For 80 years since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons haven't been used in conflict. That mutual assured destruction created a stable, if terrifying, balance.
But that balance is ending. AI changes the game.
That's the argument. AI introduces new vulnerabilities, new offensive capabilities, potentially bypassing nuclear deterrence. We need a new form of deterrence based on AI superiority. Pausing development unilaterally just gives our competitors a free pass to catch up or pull ahead.
Which ties into the whole free rider problem, especially with our allies.
Yes. Look at defense spending. The U.S. is typically around 3 to 5% of GDP. Most of Europe hovers around 1.5%.
Relying on the U.S. security umbrella.
Pretty much. President Obama was clearly frustrated by it, calling allies free riders. Josep Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, admitted Europe had shrunk its forces into bonsai armies.
Germany being a prime example.
Yeah, decades of perhaps necessary but ultimately constraining self-reflection on its past have left its military, as the source puts it, something of a caricature. which arguably emboldened adversaries.
And in Asia, you have Japan's constitution limiting its military role.
Article 9. Again, understandable historical reasons, but in today's geopolitical climate, the source argues these self-imposed limitations in key allies like Germany and Japan create dangerous power vacuums.
The bottom line being, while we debate and hesitate, our adversaries are moving forward. We need to understand their mindset. Xi Jinping, for instance.
Xi's commitment to hard power, to the state the Leviathan, is deeply rooted in his personal experience. Witnessing the chaos and brutality of the Cultural Revolution, even losing family members.
It taught him that order and control requires strength. Absolute strength.
A harsh lesson, completely at odds with the Western end of history optimism. He doesn't see power as obsolete. He sees it as essential for survival and national advancement.
And he studies us.
Closely. Very closely. His daughter went to Harvard. He makes a point of understanding Western culture, even seeking out Hemingway's old haunts in Cuba. Why? As he said, to get a deep understanding of the cultures different from our own.
That's chilling, in a way. While our tech leaders might be dismissive of national culture, our main rival is studying ours to find weaknesses.
It highlights the strategic cost of our own cultural amnesia. And this feeds directly into the investment gap. We're just not funding the future adequately.
Okay, quantify that gap. The overall U.S. defense budget is huge, nearly $900 billion.
Right. But the specific request for AI capabilities in the 2024 budget, only $1.8 billion.
$1.8 billion out of nearly $900 billion.
It's about 0.2%, a rounding error. It shows we're still fundamentally structured to buy 20th century hardware tanks, planes, ships.
When the real strategic advantage is shifting to the software that controls those things.
Exactly. Software is now at the helm. Hardware drones, robots increasingly just implements the decisions made by AI. We need a massive shift in funding priorities, a new Manhattan Project for AI to develop things like autonomous drone swarms, advanced targeting, and to keep that tech exclusively ours.
But again, the cultural roadblock, getting the engineers who build sophisticated ad platforms to build sophisticated defense platforms.
That's the crux of it, which is why the source argues we need a fundamental rethink not just of what we build, but how we organize ourselves to build it.
So if we need to rebuild this technological republic, it's not just about more money or different projects. It's about culture, organization. How do you actually structure innovation for these high-stakes goals?
The source looks beyond traditional corporate or government models. It finds inspiration in some surprising places, like honeybees.
Honeybees, seriously.
Seriously. The X-Swarm study from the 1950s by Martin Lindauer, it detailed how a bee swarm finds a new home. It's a masterclass in decentralized coordination.
How does it work? There's no CEO bee telling them where to go.
Nope. Scout bees find potential sites and come back to the swarm. They perform a dance. The enthusiasm and length of the dance signal the quality of the site. Other bees check it out, come back, and dance if they agree.
So it's like a democratic consensus-building process.
In a way, yes. A bottom-up system where the best ideas gain momentum through distributed validation. It's incredibly efficient and resilient.
And the contrast is with human bureaucracies.
Which often waste enormous energy on internal politics, right? Jockeying for position, claiming credit, avoiding blame. The bees don't bother with that. They're focused purely on the task.
Okay, so decentralized, task-focused. How does that translate to human organizations like startups?
It leads to this idea of the improvisational startup. The source mentions Palantir giving new hires books on improvisational theater.
Improv, like yes and.
Exactly that principle. In improv, you accept what your partner offers and build on it. Innovation needs that flexibility. You can't be rigidly attached to the original plan. You have to constantly adapt to what's actually working, embrace unexpected discoveries.
Which means hierarchies need to be flexible too. Not like that old story about the electronics company Philco.
Oh yeah, where your office furniture was dictated by your rank. That kind of rigid intrinsic status kills innovation.
So status should be based on what you can do right now, not your job title.
Precisely. Instrumental, not intrinsic. Hierarchies might still exist, but they need to be fluid. If a junior engineer has the breakthrough idea for a critical problem, they need to be able to lead that effort, regardless of seniority. You have to treat top technical talent almost like artists, give them freedom, respect their quirks.
Because sometimes those quirks, that nonconformity, are actually key to their breakthroughs. even though we know conformity is a powerful human instinct.
It absolutely is. And the source revisits those classic psychology experiments by Ash and Milgram to underscore just how powerful.
Ash's line experiment.
Right, people denying the evidence of their own eyes just to fit in with the group giving the wrong answer. It shows how easily social pressure can warp judgment.
And Milgram's obedience study is even more disturbing.
Yeah, people administering what they thought were painful, dangerous electric shocks to a stranger just because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to.
Even when they heard screams of pain.
A shocking number continued. Milgram noted how they remained polite, deferential to the authority figure, even while doing something morally repugnant. It showed that obedience to procedure could override basic morality. A really chilling finding, especially post-WWII.
So if conformity and obedience are such strong defaults, how do you build organizations that resist them?
You need to deliberately cultivate a culture of constructive disobedience.
Constructive disobedience, meaning questioning orders, challenging assumptions.
Yes, a willingness to push back, to resist the impulse to just comply without thinking. This often requires a certain indifference to social approval. The source even draws a parallel to artists.
The idea of productive disabilities.
Kind of, like Monet's cataracts possibly pushing him towards abstraction, or Beethoven's deafness forcing him into new compositional territory. Sometimes, being less sensitive to social cues, being the difficult genius, can actually be an advantage in pushing boundaries.
Okay, so you need this mindset, this culture. But how do you fight the massive inertia of existing bureaucracies? The Palantir lawsuit against the Army seems like a key example here.
It's a perfect case study. It wasn't just about a contract. It was a direct challenge to the entrenched, often ineffective way the military procured technology.
And the context was critical of the IED crisis in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Absolutely devastating. Thousands of soldiers killed by roadside bombs, partly because the Army's internal data systems couldn't effectively integrate intelligence to predict threats. There was this huge gulf between the contractors building the systems and the soldiers using them.
Unlike WWII, where pilots could go directly to the factory floor and demand changes.
That connection was broken. The Army's software efforts became these abstract, bureaucratic projects, disconnected from the urgent reality on the ground.
So Palantir sued. On what grounds?
They used a specific law, the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act of 1994, FASA.
FASA, what does that require?
It essentially said the government has to consider buying commercially available products off-the-shelf software before spending billions building its own custom systems from scratch.
Which sounds like common sense, but bureaucracies hate it.
Because they prefer control. Building in-house keeps everything under wraps, guarantees budgets, protects jobs. FASA demanded they check if someone in the private sector had already built a better mousetrap. The Army wanted to build its own system, ignoring Palantir's proven commercial alternative.
And the judge agreed with Palantir.
Judge Horn ruled the Army's decision was arbitrary and capricious, a huge deal. It forced the Army to evaluate Palantir's tech, which they eventually chose.
So a Silicon Valley company took over a major Army intelligence program.
A landmark moment. It signaled that the locus of software innovation had shifted, and the old military-industrial complex had to adapt.
But the source goes even deeper, questioning the very incentives we create for public service. This price of piety section.
Yeah, it asks a provocative question. Why does the richest country on Earth rely on, essentially, volunteers to run its most critical functions?
Like the Fed chair, earning less than $200.
Right. Jerome Powell manages global financial stability and makes a tiny fraction of what he could in the private sector. He lives off savings. Members of Congress make $174K.
Which means you either have to be independently wealthy to take the job, or maybe tempted to cash in later.
It certainly narrows the pool. Contrast that with Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew.
He pegged government salaries to the private sector.
Exactly. Top ministers earn salaries comparable to top lawyers or bankers. Lee's reasoning was blunt. You want top talent, you have to pay for it. Politicians are real men and women, he said, not priests working for virtue alone. You have to align self-interest with public service.
That's pragmatic, but it bumps up against our desire for, well, purity in public figures. Which brings us to Admiral Rickover.
The Rickover paradox. He was the brilliant, abrasive father of the nuclear navy, got nuclear subs built incredibly fast, a huge strategic advantage, a rude genius.
But he also accepted gifts from contractors. Peak trays, stuff like that.
Yeah, about $67,000 worth over many years. Not bribes for contracts, more like tokens of appreciation. But his enemies use it to paint him as corrupt, above the rules.
So the paradox is, Do we tolerate the difficult, rule-bending genius who gets results? Or do we insist on absolute procedural purity, even if it means slower progress and less decisive leadership?
That's the uncomfortable question the source leaves us with. Are we sacrificing vital outcomes, building the tech we need, staying ahead of adversaries because we're prioritizing squeaky clean processes, and casting out anyone unpopular, the unlikable, and the less than charismatic?
Is our pursuit of administrative perfection making us strategically ineffective?
It's a real tension. We might be creating systems that are perfectly ethical on paper, but staffed by well-meaning managers who can't achieve the necessary breakthroughs. Maybe, the source suggests, we need to make space for complexity, even forgive some flaws if the results are critical for national survival.
It's a huge challenge. And it circles back to the beginning. Rebuilding a technological republic isn't just engineering. It needs a shared sense of purpose, a collective identity.
Without that shared identity, innovation just serves narrow interests, maybe a secluded elite. The cultural hollowing out, even if well-intentioned, left this void.
And the market filled it, defining us by what we buy.
Leaving us rudderless, as the source says, just when we need direction most. Lee Kuan Yew saw this in Singapore. He actively built a national culture, mandating language programs, fostering shared values, because he knew it was essential for long-term survival.
He thought in terms of centuries, which connects to that definition of a nation by Ernest Renan.
From 1882, Renan said a nation is basically an everyday plebiscite, a daily choice. It's built on past sacrifices, yes, but it exists now because people have the clearly expressed desire to continue a common life.
We all have to keep voting yes in that plebiscite. Engineers, leaders, citizens. We have to decide what we're for, not just what we're against.
And apply that engineering pragmatism to collective goals, not just consumer ones.
The source ends on a pretty stark note, doesn't it?
It does. A reminder that empires can fall quickly, unexpectedly. And in this new era, it's culture that shared purpose, that answer to what are we for, that will ultimately determine whether we win or even prevent the next major conflict. We need to build something positive in the space left by the narratives we dismantled, or risk having nothing left to defend.